So everybody has wisdom and insights. You might not know how to sell them or market them, but we all have industry knowledge. And I don't want to hear anybody's answer about being trustworthy or honest because, if that's just, that is the price of entry. When society goes bad, it's because of storytelling. And that applies today. But I think people shouldn't be timid. They should always tell their stories, and there will be people that will listen.
Exactly.
So it's really remarkable what's happened with thought leadership. And I think the only obstacle to any person or any business wanting to grab the thought leadership discipline is that there's no shortage of players, imposters, gadflies, and whoever it might be.
I'm Jarie Bolander, and welcome to the Entrepreneur Ethos Podcast. This podcast is all about how to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient world through educating and inspiring the next generation of entrepreneur through powerful storytelling. Let's get started. Tom Marks, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
It is an honor and a privilege to have you on because you are the author of the second best business book ever written, which I personally love the title. And I just think, it's one of those things where it evokes a lot of really cool, like a sticker and emotion, but I love the subheading or the subtitle, The Pursuit of Thought Leadership in Sales, Marketing, and Life, which is what you've done for a long time. But before we get into all that, I am going to tell you and ask you and understand what I always say to everyone because I'm lazy. My first question is always the same. Tell us how you got to do what you're doing today.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I think at some point we'll probably do the big reveal, like what do you think the best business book ever? Which is something that's asked of me every day. And I don't mind that at all. But I love your first question so much. And I love origin stories because it's one of the few things in life that all of us have, whether we realize it or not. And some of those stories are aspirational and uplifting, and some are tragic, and some have a straight path. Others have this winding road, but we all have them. And of course, I have them. So in answer to your question, and I get really emotional about this, so bear with me. I followed both parents, not one parent, which is, typical in cases, but both parents. And my father, Melvin Marks, literally graduated from high school in Iowa, was on a bus that week, as many of the greatest generation were, and was in basic training a few days later, which wasn't, it really was basic because soldiers were needed. I don't think there was a lot of training. And 6 weeks later, he was stepping over bodies on the beaches of Normandy.
Wow.
And he would tell me that, and he never talked about that, it wasn't until much later that he said, I had just turned 18 and I didn't know enough to come out of the rain. And here I was, away from home for 4 years. He didn't come back to the States until in Riverside, California, and went from Normandy to the Battle of Britain, and then the Battle of the Bulge, and then crossed the Rhine into Germany in 1944.
Wow.
And came home and used the GI Bill to go to college. Wow. And his first gig was the beat reporter in the Midwest for Variety magazine, which is, still around today.
Yeah, that's true. But
I
deep
mean, it's
reporting.
crazy.
Wow. Amazing.
And so he was a writer first, then he worked in several ad agencies in Chicago, including Foot Cone and Bell, and then opened his own business as a food and marketing consultant, and found fame as the inventor of Orville Redenbacher popping corn.
Really?
Yeah. So
Oh, cool.
yeah. So this is, a long time ago. It was sold many years ago to Hunt Wesson. But so my father and his partner went to Valparaiso, Indiana, where Orville Redenbacher was an ag agent, I think for Purdue or Indiana State, one of those schools. And he was selling popping corn to taverns in little Ziploc baggies. And he had heard about my dad, and it's only an hour drive from Chicago. My father and his partner came up with this idea to put Orville's face on a glass jar and call it gourmet popping corn and triple the price of what was then the number one home popping corn, which was, I think, Jiffy Pop,
Yeah. Yeah.
on your stove. And
Mhm.
so I'll just continue with this story. So many years later, my father was walking down an aisle at the FMI show, the Food Marketing Institute show, which is always held in McCormick Place in Chicago, and runs into Orville, and he's surrounded by two suits from Hunt Wesson, and he introduces them to my father, who said, "This is the ass," not exactly those words, "who charged me $20,000 to put my name on a glass jar." And then, and so much later in life, only a few years ago, my father said that he actually stiffed him and only gave him 15,000 of the 20. So
Wow.
after my father retired, he became a writer full time.
Okay.
And my mother was a designer, commercial designer, and opened her business 65 years or more ago. Both my parents are long gone, but I mean, she was a woman in a man's world and a business owner 65, 66, 67 years ago. So I went down that same path of business ownership. I opened my agency in 1983 when I was 28 or 27. And now I'm a writer, just following my faith. I mean, the whole thing is sort of odd.
It is definitely a circuitous path for sure.
Yeah, and it's and there wasn't any curves or cliffs that I fell off. Um, I retired after 46 or 47 years of owning my own business, and then just decided to write a book. So that's my origin story.
Wow. Wow. That's Orville Redenbacher.
Yeah. So
I love
his
it.
his
Love it.
the company he had was called Bow Tie Popping. So we know where that comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, he should have gave your dad some stock in the company because that 15 grand he spent probably made him millions.
I believe it made him about, 50 or 60
Yeah.
times. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the one thing that no one understands about good marketing. Like I get this all the time, like, can you give me the ROI on these marketing campaigns? And, there's all the performance marketing, blah, 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 brand, whatever. But no one ever wants to say the dirty word of brand building, because brand building, there's ROI. It's hard to measure. Okay. You could probably try, but in some cases it's table stakes. And the power of good marketing and the power of a good, like what your father did for Orville. I mean, yeah, you put your face on a jar, but that made you 50 million. So
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
I know.
it gets frustrating at some time. I'm sure you've had plenty of those situations through your 47-year career where, you just sit there and the client just like does not get, we in the same room? They don't.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm curious because, the second best business book ever written, which I think is an awesome title, as I said.
Thank you.
What are some of those things that you kind of learned through your career as advising people on how to build brand and marketing, like the equivalent of put your face on a glass jar and triple the price or quadruple the price? And if, it'd be great if it's, some of the stuff that may be in the book. I mean, you mentioned thought leadership, which I think is a really, especially now, a very powerful thing. I can't think of one business leader that shouldn't be a thought leader in something.
Right. Right.
The world is so saturated with just everything that I think you're really only going to start to trust the people that, are out there talking about what you resonate with. So
that's right. I mean, the thing I like, Jarie, most about thought leadership, and I divide it into three parts. So wisdom and insights, trust and honesty, ethics and causes. And if you can nail those three, then you're going to be a thought leader. And it doesn't matter if it's, the local donut shop, which I've been known to frequent.
Man after my own heart.
Every day is National Donut Day.
In my world, I agree.
But it doesn't matter if it's, small retail or Fortune 500 company. And none of these business principles to me should only apply to the largest companies. They're not principles unless they're embraceable by everyone. And thought leadership is, and that's what I really like about it. So everybody has wisdom and insights. You might not know how to sell them or market them, but we all have industry knowledge. And I don't want to hear anybody's answer about being trustworthy or honest, because, if that's just, that is the price of entry.
Yeah. Table stakes.
Yeah.
Sure.
It sure is. And then causes and ethics are really important. At least they are to me, and they are to thought leaders. They just believe that things need to be ethical. You got to do the right thing, which Peter Drucker told us to do. And you need to help people who can't help themselves. And if you can nail that stuff, you're going to be a thought leader. And that's why I think everybody has the chance to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't read the book yet. I actually picked it up today. But as I was skimming through it, one of the things that you mentioned was the 4 ancient philosophers that are sort of, the foundation of Western thought, right? Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and Aspasia. I have a hard time with words. I write okay, but
I think you write really well, actually.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. What's fascinating about what you just put in there is that my personal opinion, the great grandfather of persuasion is Aristotle. And it's because of his rhetorical triangle.
That's
which
right.
I liberally steal and use in everything I do. It's literally in every book that I write about marketing, the pathos, the logos, and the ethos.
Yes.
And I love that because all great stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that basically matches the pathos, the logos, and ethos. And this is the thing I love about what you just said. Like, we're all thought leaders. These principles stand the test of time. And no matter who you are, where you are, it applies. And that is one of the most powerful things that I've found is just transcends anything I've ever thought about. And that's the reason why storytelling to me is so powerful. So I'm curious of those 4, like you say those are 4 of your favorites, which great. Are there other ones that may be on the list too? And also, like, what can those 4 teach us?
So I don't have another 4, and 4 is all I can handle. Usually 3 is all I can handle, but 4 is all I can handle. But there are plenty of, I favor the Greek scholars, the Romans, not so much. So,
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Great.
that's a whole different subject.
I mean, we could, yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah. So, um, I like this. I like the fact that Socrates' ace student was Plato, and Plato's number one student was Aristotle, and their muse was Aspasia, who I believe is the very first feminist. And the Greeks didn't treat their women so well, and some of that has changed, but not all of it. But Aspasia, who I write in the book, was the first feminist by far, didn't come to light until a famous artist named Judy Chicago, from Chicago, not her given name, but Judy Chicago, who now lives in Albuquerque. I think she's in her mid-80s. Wonderful. Did a very famous art installation called The Dinner Party. And it's now at the Brooklyn Museum of Art, but it debuted at the Art Institute in Chicago. And I went to it. My mother took me there. And of the 32 women who Judy Chicago deemed as the most special women of many, many centuries, one was Aspasia. And that's like the first time she was recognized for being probably the most gifted orator or rhetorician among the Greeks. And she coached Socrates on his final speech before he consumed his potion of, hemlock and whatever else they were using.
Right.
But it reminds me of this wonderful movie called The Speech that I write about in my book. And I think it was, it was Colin Firth and Jeffrey
Rush.
Jeffrey Rush. Yeah, exactly. Very good. Coaching Colin Firth on, this big speech he was giving. Anyway, so I just love Aspasia. But these Greek scholars taught us so much. But one of the things that we overlook is that they were the original classic storyteller. They really, and I go through that in my book, and it's really fascinating, some of the things that they said, like, when society goes bad, it's because of storytelling. And that applies today.
That applies to everything. Yeah.
Everything. Totally. And so I just love there are a lot of things that really bothered me about their philosophies. But there's just so much knowledge, and it's so relevant 2,500 years later. So I get a kick out of everybody that's jumped on the storytelling bandwagon. The statistics are new, don't get me wrong. Within the last 40, 50 years, but they're 2,500 years old.
Yeah.
They really are. And these guys were classic. They were just really wonderful. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. You did. Well, it's funny because, I'm a fan of that as well. But then I also did a little research on the first story that was ever written down was something called the Epic of Gilgamesh. I think it was Epic of Gilgamesh. And it was basically talking about his wisdom to his son. This is the first story. The first actual written stuff was basically an accounting of things. So it was basically a TPS report. We have this many tweet and this, but this Epic of Gilgamesh was literally wisdom for his son as the next ruler. I think it was out of Egypt or Mesopotamia. It wasn't even Egypt back then. It was Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
And it was just advice on what not to do. And the best one was, don't make any decisions when you've drinking too much beer. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good advice.
That's really good.
I wish some folks would take more off.
I know, including dialing.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I, it's really remarkable, what's happened with thought leadership. And I think, the only obstacle to any person or any business wanting to grab the thought leadership discipline is that there's no shortage of players, imposters, gadflies and whoever it might be. But otherwise, other than that, and other than a friend of mine who I wrote about in the book, who claims that the best pickup line ever is "I'm a thought leader."
I
Other
thought it was I'm an author. That doesn't work.
no, no. He claims it's "I'm a thought leader." And of course, I said the only thing you ever picked up was COVID. So, um,
Well,
so
there you go.
yeah. So maybe it's not that good a line, but otherwise, it's accessible to anyone. I mean, it really, really is. And I go through this step-by-step process. It's probably a little too detailed, um, but you can do it. You absolutely can do it, and everybody should go for it.
Yeah. No, I mean, and to your point about accessible, and I think really thought leadership is also great storytelling,
It is.
especially telling your story, and your story, the uniqueness, the specificity of it may to some feel like, oh, why are you talking about, you run a garbage collection agency and blah, 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 or garbage collection company. But the, just the passion that comes through and the like, this is my life's work. And yeah, okay. As an example, there was this one, it was on TikTok, or this one guy on TikTok, maybe, or on X now, which was Twitter. And he worked for a sanitation company, literally like, so, I don't remember the name of it, someplace in the middle of nowhere. And literally he was writing about sanitation, and he would write stories about the sanitation workers. And I mean, sanitation is vital, but super boring. And there was this one story thread that he had, I think it was on Twitter, where he started off with, here are some tomatoes that someone has eaten. And then he followed the story. And then, hey, look, there's a tomato plant at the sewer treatment plant. Like,
Yeah. Oh, I
it's
love it.
like, it made it.
I
And,
love
and this guy's like a manager, and he's not even like the CEO, but to your point, he just owns the thought leadership on making sanitation accessible and why it's important. And
That's
it's because he truly believes and truly feels that this is important work. And there's a lot of respect for that. I have a lot of respect for that. I also think that can sometimes be missing with people, like how do you go about, or missing, or people are afraid. How do you go about making people less afraid to tell their story and really kind of own their narrative?
Yeah. I think, there are a couple things that come to mind when I listen to you. I do get a kick out of everybody talking now about stories stacking. I mean, Aristotle was stacking stories 2,500 years ago and that telling us plot first, character development second, which is what most writers don't do. I mean,
No. I mean, James
yeah,
Patterson is all character driven.
that's right. I mean,
Like the plot's the plot, but yeah, I like this guy,
that's right. I mean, if you don't like the characters, you probably don't stick with it. So,
No.
but characters need to go somewhere. I mean, they've got to start somewhere. They got to end somewhere. Then there needs to be tragedy and triumph and all this sort of stuff. But that was really interesting. So Aristotle was stacking stories long ago. So I get a kick out of all these people on the pro speaking circuit, which I tolerated for many years, with all these newfangled things, which are so old that, they're old as the hills. But to your point, I think what happens to people, and they get anxious, they get nervous about telling stories. It's about who they're telling stories to. And sometimes people, they're rude. you know, and sometimes they don't appreciate it, and sometimes they don't listen, like
Oh,
most
yeah.
of the time.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that turns a lot of people off. I really do. So, um, next time, if somebody's telling you a story about their wedding ring that went down the disposal or something, it's meaningful to them. It might not be meaningful to you. Maybe there's a nugget in there, but do that person a favor and listen, because it goes both ways. And I've had plenty of people that didn't listen to anything I had to say. And I was fortunate enough over the years to avoid them the rest of my life. But I think people shouldn't be timid. They should always tell their stories, and there will be people that will listen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that.
So tell me your origin story.
Oh, my origin
Oh,
story?
sure.
Gonna
I
throw
mean, it
you
goes
out.
both ways.
Well, yeah, anyone that's listened to the show, of course, knows most of it. But yeah, I mean, the reason why I do what I'm doing today is I always like to say is because I met a girl,
Yeah.
actually a woman, but girl sounds better from a storytelling perspective. Her name was Jane, and she died of leukemia 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So didn't know that was going to happen in my life. Didn't know I was going to be a widower at 46. She was 36. I was 10 years older than her. But when we met and fell in love, it was this sort of whirlwind, weird sort of thing because I had been married before and literally got divorced, and I was just not in a good place. I was drinking a lot, and I just was not, I didn't know what the hell to do with my life. And I, of all places, went to a gay pride breakfast in San Francisco to help a friend of mine who is now the mayor of San Francisco, London.
Oh, yeah.
She was running her first ever campaign. She's running for supervisor. She's like, I got to fill the table. You got to come and press and grin, because all the city family is what we call it here in San Francisco, the city family, will be at this gay pride breakfast. And it's the Alice B. Toklas Gay Democratic Club. And it was at 8:00 in the morning on a Sunday. I was extremely hungover, did not want to go. My friends had to drag me there. And I met Jane there, and I have a picture of the very first time we met, which I still have. And that changed my life. Like that single moment, that was one of them. And then, we got married, and then she got leukemia. And for 15 months, she sort of battled leukemia. And then when she died, that was another monumental place in life. Not a lot of people, I hope no one has to go through it, but we're probably going to have to. Some of us will go through losing a spouse or losing a child or whatever. And I was lost again, really. And the one thing that I had to do when she got sick was run her PR and marketing company, right? So I just learned to appreciate storytelling, and I learned to appreciate like the art and craft of it. And turns out I'm okay at it. Like I'm pretty good at it. And I used to be an engineer. So it was this weird thing. Like I'm an engineer, like this story thing, marketing just fluff because here's not the fluff, right? But for whatever reason, it sort of grabbed onto me, and I realized that, and I wrote a memoir about our experience called Ride or Die, right?
Yeah.
Which was just a labor of love and very cathartic and healing.
Right.
Everyone, in fact, the audiobook just came out last week, which is, I narrated it. I narrated it too, which is really,
Oh, you did? Oh,
yeah. So it's like, oh, that's me.
okay. You did a video. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that. And it's like, that was tough. That's a whole other story. But, I found myself doing this sales and marketing and storytelling for business, and really, I just love to write. So, and it's apparently rare because people, I get writer's block. I'm like, I can't shut my mind up. I can't stop writing.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not always great, but it's something, So yeah, I just started to really do research and think and write and do podcasts and talk to interesting people. And now I do this sales and marketing consulting, and I help companies tell their story, among other things, and really trying to figure out, like, to your point, what's your next thing after you retire? I'm like trying to think about what's my next thing, for the next 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just,
Well, I read about your stuff, and it's very moving. And I'm curious, do you think back more about the hardship, or do you think about the joy?
that's a good question. It depends on the day.
It does. Okay.
Depends on the day. In general, I think back very fondly to those times, even when she was sick, because it really focuses the mind. Like, when you don't know if you're going to have another day, like, even though it's a shitty day, make that day count, right?
Right.
I try to do that throughout my life. It's hard to do because, like, oh, wow, what are you going to live like a heathen? I'm like, no, I'm just like, I got another day. She didn't get another day, right? So more often than not, I think about it fondly. There are times where I get in my own private pity party and I'm like, why me? Right. Sometimes it's when I'm talking about the book. Sometimes it's just alone when I'm just thinking about it. A couple of times when I was recording the voiceover for the book, especially some of the real tough parts, I'm just like, I'm like crying, I'm like in tears, sobbing, like I want to throw this iPad through the window. I'm just so pissed off that I had to, this is bullshit, right? Total full stop.
Right.
And then, I have a fiance now, which is great. It's just
That's
so
great.
beautiful, to find love again. So there's hope. There's hope for everyone, even knucklehead like me. And I also realize, and this took me a while to realize and to actually figure out, was that something good came out of her dying, which sounds weird, but that was the reason I stopped drinking. So I've been sober for 6 years, and that's a gift. Like, it was a horrible thing to go through, but she has given me so many gifts to this day,
Mm-hmm.
and has just, the trajectory of my life is just like, it's truly a zig and a zag. But my gosh, I am who I am today because of her and that experience, and I'm just a better partner, better future husband, a better future stepfather. I'm just a better human.
Yeah.
Because I went through that, and she helped me realize the power of love. So
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you walked through the fire, as the poster behind you said.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Bukowski. Oh, yeah. In more ways than
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great story, though.
yeah. It's tough, man, because it's one of the most extreme examples of what you'll go through in life. Losing someone you love, and
That's right.
it's just like, why? Like, there's just a lot of weird thought to go through your head.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah.
And that's why I wrote the book too. Like, I wanted
That
other
helps.
men. Yeah, I wanted other men also not to feel alone. Like,
Right.
you're not alone. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
You can get through it if someone. I'm not the most positive person.
Oh, I don't know. Sure sounds that way to me.
Oh, appreciate
So
that. Thank you.
that's congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. And do you plan on narrating your book, or are you gonna? I mean, you're like me. You got a face made for radio. I think
That's
you're
right.
in good shape.
The answer to that question is a resounding no. Although the guy who I wanted to narrate my book is dead.
Oh no.
So that really complicates things. It's an actor named Mason Adams
Okay.
who had the best voice ever. I mean, even better than Morgan Freeman or James Earl Jones or, all these, Samuel L. Jackson, who was, back when I was doing that sort of work, Samuel Jackson was getting 300 grand for a 30, that's like an hour of work. But Mason Adams was this classic VO guy, and I can't remember, he was in a few movies, but I don't think I can get through it, because I was reading the epilogue my epilogue to my son and my wife and my son's lady friend and her mother. And I couldn't get through it. And my epilogue is, I don't know, it's only 4 or 5 pages. It's just
Yeah.
my beliefs in thought leadership going beyond business, that it's really got to become a part of your life. It's just like, if I can't get through 4 pages, I'm not getting through 300. So, yeah, that's a no.
Hard no.
Hard.
Yeah. It's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough. You have a new appreciation for the actors that do that, because
Oh, yeah.
it was really tough. Well, it was great to speak with you. I can't wait to read your book. I encourage everyone to go out and get it. Is there any place that we can go find you on the internet? Are you on LinkedIn? Like, what's the best way to keep in touch with you and, follow your journey as this book?
So, yeah. So LinkedIn would be the best place. You won't find me on TikTok. But LinkedIn is the best place. My company, when I had a company, was TMA Peritus, Peritus. And that website, tmaperitus.com, is still live. So there's information about me there. And I've got another website when I was on the circuit, which is under thomasmarks.com. And, but I think LinkedIn is the place to find me. And if anyone really wants to know what the first business book is, it's in my introduction. So I'll spare you the necessity of buying the book, which I hope, but I can tell you that in the introduction, I talk about, tongue in cheek, of course, that the best business book ever written was How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, which of course became a Tony Award winner and a great movie.
Yeah.
Robert Morse and but my favorite business book and my mentor at the Claremont colleges in Claremont, California, is Peter Drucker's Management. And I still, you know what? I still have it on my desk.
Wow.
My first edition copy.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
It's totally ruined. First edition copies you're supposed to keep clean.
Yeah.
Mine is not. But anyway, that really is what I think, even 60 years later, the best business book ever written, because business books, as I wrote about, are photographs of time. They just, there's just no way you can keep a business book current, particularly if you're, referring to companies and using them as examples. So Peter Drucker's Management, to me, is the best business book ever written. And he would tell you to buy his book first if he was alive, and mine second.
I love it. Well, thank you, Peter, for that. I'm sure. Well, again, it's been a pleasure. Good luck with the book. Can't wait to read it. I love the stories. I just love the idea that thought leadership's for everyone. So,
well, thanks so much for having me. And I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, every minute of it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Entrepreneur Ethos Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it. My hope is that you learned something that can make you a little bit better. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do share it with friends and review it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also join my email list by visiting theentrepreneurethos.com to get my thoughts on what I'm doing to get better, as well as what I'm working on. You can also pick up my book, The Entrepreneur Ethos, if you want to learn the traits, values, and beliefs that I think we need to build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient entrepreneur and, frankly, world community. Feel free to follow me on Twitter @TheDailyMBA and let me know if you have any questions or recommendations for a guest you'd like me to talk to. Also, drop me a note if you try anything we talked about on this or any other episode. I'd love to hear what's working for you. Until next time, keep getting better.